baby mama. This been pregnant, white.
What if the most convincing royal story you've ever watched only worked because someone was erased from it completely? And what if that silence is finally breaking? Stay with this, because by the end, the question won't be whether the narrative was polished, but how much of it was ever real at all. She was never meant to be part of the story you were told, at least not the version meant for public consumption. For years, audiences were presented with a flawless, carefully staged narrative. Modern royal romance, 2 pregnancies, 2 children, all unfolding seamlessly under soft lighting, steady smiles, and picture-perfect appearances that signaled happiness and normalcy. Nothing seemed amiss. But according to one woman, that polished image only worked because she herself had been erased from it. She chooses to be known simply as anonymous, not a persona, not a headline-friendly name, just a shield, because, she says, even her identity was never meant to outlive the arrangement. Anonymous claims she wasn't on the sidelines or loosely connected. She alleges she carried both children from the earliest weeks of pregnancy until birth, and then, just as quietly, vanished. Her silence, she insists, wasn't voluntary. It was required. No interviews, no acknowledgement, no public existence, no space in the narrative at all. While the world celebrated visible motherhood, she says she lived entirely outside the record, unseen and unspoken. For a long time, that silence held, allowing the official story to remain untouched and immaculate. But now Anonymous says that silence was never supposed to be permanent, and the image everyone accepted may have depended on it more than anyone realized. Here's where the story shifts from whispers to structure. Because according to Anonymous, none of this happened by chance. She describes an operation built on order, not emotion, saying she was brought in through a discreet, high-level agency that functioned well beyond public view. The expectations, she claims, were laid out plainly. She would carry the pregnancies, follow strict medical protocols, and once the children were born, she would exit completely. No future contact, no public presence, no trace that could lead back to her. Anonymous recalls that period of her life as intensely controlled, with limited movement, minimal outside communication, and days shaped around medical care, rest, and isolation. She's careful to say she doesn't frame it as mistreatment, but as precision, every measure calculated to achieve one result while leaving no evidence behind. That silence, she says, wasn't just implied, it was contractual, sealed through detailed agreements covering compensation, lifelong confidentiality, and total removal from the story. And once it was over, according to Anonymous, that's exactly what happened. She vanished from the narrative, and for years, the world never knew she was there at all. For a long time, the version the public knew rolled on without disruption. Appearances were made, the image stayed polished, and silence quietly held everything in place. But according to Anonymous, silence has weight, and eventually it becomes unbearable. Living completely outside the record, she says, grew heavier than finally stepping into it. Now, Anonymous claims this is no longer just her word against a story. She alleges she holds signed contracts, medical files, pregnancy timelines, ultrasound records, and written exchanges involving legal teams and the agency that oversaw the arrangement. She says she has secured legal representation, is prepared to testify under oath, and is open to DNA testing through formal legal channels. And once a process like that begins, public relations lose their grip. Statements can't stop it, and silence can't delay it, because evidence moves on its own. While Anonymous says she lived in isolation, the world watched a very different picture unfold. Cameras capturing Meghan Markle in public appearances, marked by visible pregnancy, calm smiles, interviews, and carefully framed moments that suggested everything was effortless and natural. According to Anonymous, both realities existed at once. One woman carried the biological truth, while another carried the image the world was meant to see. Here's where the cracks start to matter, because according to Anonymous, the imbalance everyone overlooked was never accidental. It was built into the plan. She claims the arrangement wasn't designed to be fair, only effective. The children would be born, the story would stay intact, and as long as the image held, no one would ask too many questions. Historically, royal births are meant to erase doubt through process. Doctors present, confirmations witnessed, records formally signed, steps that exist to cement legitimacy. In this case, those familiar rituals were missing, replaced by brief announcements and little else. At the time, the explanation offered was privacy, but privacy doesn't require protocol to disappear. The two can coexist. Anonymous alleges that concerns about these missing steps did surface, just not in public. And instead of being addressed, they were quietly discouraged. The gaps weren't explained, they were simply accepted. And in institutions that live by documentation, missing procedures rarely go unnoticed without reason. For a while, the approach worked, appearances continued, the image stayed polished, and the story moved forward as if nothing had been skipped. But silence has limits. It can't correct what people slowly begin to notice on their own. Over time, small inconsistencies started drawing attention, shifting outlines, unusual folds, moments that felt curated rather than natural. On their own, none proved anything. But patterns don't depend on single moments. They emerge through repetition. This is where the story takes its sharpest turn, because according to Anonymous, those odd moments people brushed off weren't random at all. They were intentional. She alleges the variations weren't natural changes, but signs of careful staging, claiming specially designed pregnancy prosthetics were used to maintain a consistent public image, with every appearance rehearsed, every angle calculated, and consistency prioritized over realism. Then came the hospital video, soft music, an intimate setting, a moment crafted to feel raw and immediate. But to many watching closely, it didn't feel spontaneous. It felt produced. And timing, as Anonymous points out, mattered. The video surfaced only after quiet questions had already begun circulating. In crisis management, that's a risky move, because when proof shows up after doubt, it rarely settles anything. It invites deeper scrutiny. Instead of anchoring the narrative, the video amplified suspicion, making authenticity look performed rather than lived. From that moment on, the question shifted. Not whether the story should be believed, but why it suddenly needed reinforcing in the first place. Because when a narrative depends on silence to hold together, that silence eventually loses its power, and once attention sharpens, even the most carefully maintained image begins to crack. And that's exactly where this story now stands. If this moment made you pause and think, don't stop here, tap like to let us know you're following the details, and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next as this story continues to unfold.